All right, there's something in nursing and in other fields, I'll go ahead and say in other fields of work, it's called mandatory overtime. Mandatory overtime is something that you did not plan on, but all of a sudden you've got to do it. In nursing specifically is what I'm going to talk about. You would have to work over if your relief does not show up. Now, if you're a CNA, you can kind of leave. If you're a nurse, you're kind of stuck. All right? So, let's say that you're working a 8 or 12-hour shift, and the end of your shift shows up, and there's no one else there to take those keys from you, or take a report from you, or whatever it is you want to call it. We always refer to it as take my keys. Like in take my keys to the med room, the Pyxis, whatever you call your where you keep your medicines. So take my keys, I'm done. So if no one's there to take your keys, then you have to keep those keys. In nursing, you have to work that shift. You have to work that floor, that hall. You are still responsible for that unit until you get relief. Now, luckily, I no longer have to worry about this. In full disclosure, I don't have to worry about mandatory overtimes anymore. In the very beginning of my nursing career, I had to constantly worry about mandatory overtimes. Someone would not show up, somebody's kid be sick, somebody's dog be sick, whatever it may be, and there was a staff need. Well, you had to keep that assignment. You had to keep those keys. So, in North Carolina, I don't know about other states, but in North Carolina, the Board of Nursing says you are responsible for 16 hours max. After 16 hours, you have to be relieved. Now, a lot of times, if you're working that mandatory overtime, that 16 hours, you really don't want to be there. You probably only packed a meal for whatever you're going to work, so that's probably you only packed a dinner or a breakfast or a supper. You probably packed one meal. Now you're going to be there for 16 hours. You got to eat again. I remember calling my wife one time. I told her, I said, you're going to have to drive down here and bring me a burger. I can't make it. I had brought like a pack of crackers and a drink because my shift was 6 a.m. to 2, and here I am still at 10 p.m. going to be at work. So I told my wife, bring me a burger. She brought me a burger. That's how I ate that day. Had my wife not brought me no burger, I'd have had to live on a pack of crackers and a drink that day. And that's all I'd have had. So, mandatory overtimes, they're terrible. They suck. I hate them. If you got to do one, I'm sorry. It's no fun. Remember that when you're a nurse, when you are the one that has to call out, see if you can get you some relief for that nurse that's still on the floor. That nurse that's still on the floor is responsible for those patients. It's not the nurse that's not coming on the floor. The nurse that's calling out, the nurse that's not showing up, they're not responsible for them patients, believe it or not. You are. You are responsible for those patients, not that person calling out. So you still have to take responsibility for those patients. You can't say, oh, you know what, they're not showing up. You know what, I'm done with this. I'm dropping my keys. I'm going to sit here at the nurse station and Google stuff. You can't do that. You still have to pass meds. You still have to give IV medications. You still have to do wound care. You still have to do assessments. Whatever it is you have to do for the next shift, you are now responsible for that. And it's terrible. And it's not fun. And you are the one being punished for something that you didn't do. Now, luckily, like I said, I don't have to worry about this anymore. This is something that I don't have to do anymore. I have left that position, thankfully. However, you may have to. And it's terrible, and it's no fun, and it's just not. Now, whenever I'd have to do one like that, whenever I'd have to do a double shift, the company that I did work for, I no longer work for them, they were nice enough to give me the next day off. Every time I had to do it, they would go ahead and give me the next day off. They at least had 2 shifts before they had to replace me so they could try to find somebody. So that was a good thing. If not, it's just not, man. And I'm sorry that you're stuck in that position. just remember this when you feel like you got to call out. See if you can get some help for that nurse that's still on the floor, because if they're still on the floor, they got to be on the floor till you done, or till, you know, some help arrives. I've heard of nurses, and, you know, like I said before, in North Carolina, the Board of Nursing says 16 hours max. I've heard of nurses. Now, the most I've ever done personally, the most I have ever done is probably about 16 and a half, like just over the 16. So enough of a window to where the state probably wouldn't be upset. But I have heard of nurses being there for like 17 hours, 19 hours. The longest I've ever heard is 21 hours a nurse was on the shift. For 21 hours. For 21 hours, that nurse had that assignment. They had those keys. They couldn't get rid of those keys. They couldn't pass them off. You know, I'm hoping that that nurse was able to get something to eat, you know, or drink or potty, you know, because you know they had to do all that stuff. So just keep that in mind whenever you feel like calling out. You know, that the nurse that you're calling out on, you know, you don't want to leave them in a bind. It's not something you want to do. I always felt bad if I ever had to call out. Luckily, I will honestly say, luckily, every time that I've ever had to call out, there was always someone there who could replace me, which was good. You know, I didn't feel like I was letting anybody down. So that mandatory overtime, I'm sorry if you got to work it. I'm sorry if your relief doesn't come in. I'm sorry you got to hold on to them keys, that assignment, you know, whatever it may be. But just stick in it, stay with it. It'll be worth it in the end. It will be. Or maybe you'll find out nursing's not for you the first time you get stuck with the keys for 17 hours. You know, I don't know. I stuck it out. I did. I got another position, and I no longer have to worry about that, which is great. So maybe something like that'll happen. That's what I got for you today. I hope it helps. If you you know, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll do my best to answer them. But I hope it helps. Thank you much. Yep.